Hello and welcome to Csit 301 Mobile Application Development. This is session 9 and today we want to talk about how native and web page can be integrated. So previously we looked at how to incorporate a web aspect into our mobile application. So we're writing a mobile application and then we're looking at how to pull parts of another web application into the mobile application. Today we want to look at how we can write our mobile application using our web tools and then be able to add native pages to our web application or mobile web application. So this session describes the Worklight APIs that supports the combination of both native and web pages inside a mobile application. All we've been doing so far is by using web pages in our mobile application. Now we'll look at how to combine a native page with a web page in one application. At the end of the session, every student should be able to combine native pages and web pages in a mobile application. The key topics to be covered: we are going to have an overview of native and web page integration. Then we'll look at how that could be combined in two of the popular platforms, Android and iOS. The materials that accompany this are on the Sakai platform. I entreat all students to do well to have a look at them. There's also the lab session which you need to follow. Please do well to do that to have a feel of how this can be done. Now, there are times where we would have some limitations with our web technologies. Now, even though we can do a lot with it, at some point, there are some things that we might not be able to achieve with the web technology. Now, Apache Cordova provides greater flexibility by allowing JavaScript to access native device features. However, there are still cases where these web technologies are not enough. So we have barcode scanner, we want to read that. It might be impossible to do that with just Apache Cordova, so we need to import or pull into our application a native page. Maybe we also want to open a native contacts page. We can't do that with our web pages, so we need to integrate a native page into our application. So Worklight provides a simple way to augment your web application with native application or your web application with native pages. So we would use Worklight hybrid coding approach. And here what we can do is we would have several pages like we are seeing from the diagram. We can have native page 1, native page 2, native page 3, and then we can have our web container. And then from there we have our web page 1, web page 2, web page 3. So all of this will be combined in one application. Now by using the Worklight hybrid coding approach, we can navigate freely between web and native pages. We can share data also between these pages, and they can share a single server session. So if through our web pages we have connected to some server, we can share that session with our native page also. Now, we can implement our own functions by creating Cordova plugins also. Now, how does this work? The developer writes one or more native pages and web pages. Then the Worklight JavaScript API allows navigation to the native page and back, including the passing of data back and forth. So this, we are going to use the WL native page.show to show a particular native page, and that accepts the class name, the callback, and then the data that we want passed to it. Then the web pages, the web page invokes the native page via the class name with the parameters that's provided. Now, upon return, the callback function is evoked. So we have a snippet of that WL native page.show. Here we are calling on a native page that is written in Java. So we have com.demo.native page, and we are passing in a callback function so that when it returns from that native page, what it could actually do. And then the data that we want to send to this native page, we also pass in the input data section. Now we want to see how to combine native and web pages on Android. Okay, so the web portion of the code for Android, here we are going to use the WL native page.show API method to start a native page. So this snippet has several parts. Using the API provided, we pass in the name of the activity to be started. So in Android, a web or a native page is an activity, and so we need to pass in the name of that activity to be started. Then the custom parameters that can be passed to the native code is also put here in the parameters. And then we have the callback function to be evoked. So we have the first part, which is the activity to be started, the callback function, and then the parameters to be sent to this activity. Now, when we come back from that activity, this callback, which has been implemented here, is going to be called. Now, an Android page must be implemented as an Android activity. Either extend the base activity class or an existing subclass. Then you use this same package and class names as in the WL native API call. So we have public class hello native extends activity. Now, like any other activity, you must declare it in the Android manifest.xml file. And if we want to retrieve parameters from the web page, we would also want to follow this approach. Now, when the activity is invoked, arguments that are passed from the web view can be retrieved by using an intent object. So here we would have that, and then we have get intent dot get string data, and then the name of that parameter we want to actually get is going to be passed here. So here we have name parameter, and we are going to get that. So this name parameter is being filled with some value from some input. Now that is stored here, and we are able to get that from our activity or our Java class by using the get intent method. So we use the get intent object dot get string extra. Now, if you've done some coding in Android, you should be familiar with this process. Returning control back to the web page, when we are done, we need to call on the finish method. So by calling on the finish method, it's going to return control back to the web page, and the data that needs to be returned would also be accepted, and then you can process that also. Now, I want to see how this combination is done on iOS. Here again, we want to use the WL native page.show. Now we are passing in the iOS UI view controller. We need to pass in the name of the iOS UI view controller to start, and then we also need to pass in the callback function and the parameters that need to be sent to this UI view controller. We need to pass that also. Now, when the native page closes, the callback function is going to be called, and then we can process the data. So creating a native iOS page in Xcode, what you need to do is you need to add it to your project class folder. You add a file, and then the subclass of that file is the UI view controller. So remember that that file that you are creating should be a subclass of UI view controller. Then you need to import the hello native.h to your class, and you can retrieve custom data parameters that are passed from the web view by using the set data from web view method. So you need to use the set data from web view method to accept that, and just like we did with the Android, you are able to accept and process data. Then to return control, when the native page switches back to the web view, a native page show web view method should be called. Okay, so when you want to return back, you need to call on the show web view method. Now you can pass data back to the web view by using the NS Dictionary object. So passing data back to the web page, you need to use NS Dictionary objects. And this shows how that can be done. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this session. We've seen that WorkLite provides a mechanism for us to integrate native page with web pages. We've also looked at how we can do that from Android. We've also looked at how we can do that from iOS. You gain a deeper understanding when you follow the lab session, because you are able to practice this, and I encourage every student to do so. Thank you. See you in the next slide.